Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both. Hope you're staying dry out there.
We are. It
is coming down today.
It is definitely coming down. My mother keeps asking me when the arcs are coming out. I'm like, they're any day now.
Well, I got my 2 dogs and my 2 cats ready. So
exactly right.
Preserving the species. Thank you, Thad.
Oh, and I'm down to 1 ferret. I got to get back up there. Oh, you didn't hear that. Well, this week's cover story is brought to us by Jennifer, and it's a very tasty and special story. So, Jennifer, would you like to fill us in on this week's cover?
I would. This week's story I was really excited to cover. I'm always interested in tribal food sovereignty and indigenous food sovereignty up here on the North Coast. But this week I got to cover an event that happened at Sumeg Village in Sumeg State Park, formerly Patrick's Point. And it was a pretty incredible day. So I'll begin with the beginning, which is that the California tribal courts got a grant for food sovereignty related activities, and organizers used that money for a multi-tribe, basically every tribal court locally was in on it, and multi-tribe event where people would share sort of traditional foodways, demonstrations of how to process everything from mussels to eels to berries, everything. And the money would be used partly to give stipends to people who have these traditional skills and who can, for example, harvest things, like Robert Ray, who brought in a ton of eels. And it helped to kind of spread both the community and also the knowledge of how to do what is called tech, the traditional ecological knowledge, how to do these sustainable practices that have been part of native foodways on the North Coast forever. And it was a really great occasion to go to. It might seem like a weird fit, right? Tribal court and foodways, but in fact, it makes absolute sense. And I got to talk to some really interesting folks about that. Among them, Kate Lowry, who is of the, she is actually Wyandot and Ojibwe, but she is here in Humboldt County working with the Northern California Tribal Court Coalition. And she was sort of the coordinator. She very humbly described herself as a gopher, but she was sort of bringing together all these people, among them Analia Hillman, Kayla Malson, Diana Beck, lots and lots of men and women who were really integral in not only their own communities, but in coming together for this event and teaching people how to do things like, processing foods, the history of how things were done, and really letting people try it themselves. Sometimes people who had never done it before. But that skill, that activity, that, transferred intergenerational knowledge is part of a building of a stronger community. And the tribal courts are really trying to do a more restorative justice approach and trying to focus on building better esteem among young people, among people who are trying to re-enter the community after, say, incarceration or substance abuse issues. basically trying to connect people back to their culture, back to this place, and back to, what some of the folks I talked to referred to as the old ways. And what they've found in, studies and in anecdotally what they see among kids is that people who, or children who gain traditional ecological knowledge, meaning, kids who are indigenous and have some sort of training or some sort of contact with folks who share with them how to, say, carve the sticks for roasting salmon around a fire, as Phil Albers from Save California Salmon came to do. He was showing people how to do this carving. That kind of thing really improves their mental health. It has positive impacts on their sense of belonging and their place in the community. Interestingly, Analia Hillman, who we've talked to before about acorns, and she organized a big acorn gathering event, and we talked about the processing of acorns. She was talking to me about something really interesting, which is people's roles in a community. So, we think about who we are in our family, right? Or who we are in our town, in our community. In terms of, a role in a community, when you lose that role, when your job, your identity is taken away from you, it's really alarming, right? And really, disorienting. And for a lot of folks, the community traditional role that somebody might have, let's say as, a fisherman, when that's taken away, when food sovereignty is taken away, as it was due to colonization, due to government and racist policies, when that's taken away, it really throws off everybody's understanding of their place in the world. She talked about the different developmental stages of starting out as a little kid, watching your family, preparing food, gathering food, etc., and then moving into adolescence and learning how hands-on to do some of those things, and then becoming an adult and teaching younger people. That those stages, when they're taken away, as they had been for so many generations, then it really creates a massive loss of self in the community. And for a long time, some of these gathering practices that they were demonstrating on the 10th, March 10th is when they had the event. Some of those were illegal for a long time. And a number of people described to me how, in order to, for example, Marion Fry is a woman who was there making satra, which is a sea anemone, which I did not know you could eat, and it was very exciting. She was saying that going and gathering them used to be illegal, and that before sort of, some breakthroughs in native fishing rights, and before the state parks in California became more open and receptive to allowing foraging and things like that, you could be busted for poaching. And so people would go under cover of darkness, people would sneak around. The fellow who was teaching the salmon stick carving, Phil Albers, was explaining to me how it used to be that even if you just talked about, foraging mussels or something, somebody might roust you and want to see if you've poached them. And so suddenly all of this, let's say your greats have been fishing and gathering in these spots since forever, but all of a sudden it's illegal. And now your cultural practice, your identity within the community, all those things are taken away. These kinds of events are about rebuilding that. And now that the state parks are more open to and a more welcoming place, there's really a lot of hope around it. And it was really great to see, folks being able to celebrate something and enjoy it at the park, and really, just really embrace traditional ecological knowledge in this practical and very celebratory way. I swear I didn't just do this so that I could try eel.
But you did, and I've been meaning to ask, how did you like it?
Okay, lamprey eel might be great. and it is freakishly boneless. I did not know it was boneless. Um, Unlike, say, a proper eel with a jaw, the lamprey eel just has like a terrifying circle of teeth at the end. But if you look away from that part, it's really delicious. Um, and it was great. As I said, Rob Ray was there. He brought like a huge pile of these eels that he caught with a traditional hook, which I have had explained to me 1,000 times, and I still don't understand how they work, but I am going to learn. But he caught all these eels on the Klamath, and which is again something that would have been possibly, you could have caught a charge for poaching for doing. But he caught all these eels and brought them, gutted them, but didn't remove the cartilaginous spine. It has this like thick, plasticky looking tube running through it that you have to use, or at least he taught everybody to use their thumbs to sort of eventually pull the whole thing out. You don't know how satisfying it is to pull that whole spine out. Also, the boots I wore, done for. Done for. It's okay. I don't think that purse is coming back either. But it was really fascinating to learn, and it was really great to, watch him prepare them, and the way that folks responded, especially elders and people who maybe hadn't had it before or hadn't had it in years, the way they responded to being able to have traditional foods that they maybe had as kids was really something. People were, it's emotional when you have the food of your childhood, the food of your people, the food that you are meant to have in this life.
Jennifer, this article was fantastic. The pictures and the intimate stories that you provided. And it is just overall a feel-good experience that the tribal indigenous people are gaining sovereignty back and gaining spaces where their cultures can be expressed and practiced again.
Yeah, we're really in a time when, like Thad has done so much reporting around the dam removal and, other issues, it's incredible to me. Like one of the women that I talked to, Bessie Shorty, was talking about her uncle who was a fisherman who took his case all the way to the Supreme Court after his nets were confiscated by a game warden. And they were like, you can get all your nets back for $1 and we'll forget about this whole thing. And he was like, no, I don't think we will. I think we'll go to the Supreme Court. And he did. And he won fishing rights back for Yurok Indian country. And it was just like, for her, there is no difference between these foods and these practices and activism. And a number of people, really brought home in conversation and their stories that, this is a moment of activism, and everything that they're able to do now is, just as in Thad's stories about the dams, it is due to generations of activists really pushing. And we happen to be alive during this really great time when so much of that work is coming to fruition.
Absolutely. Well, any final thoughts before we turn to Mr. Greenson?
Yes. I'm sorry, but sea anemone and all of that stuff was so great. But it's really important that non-native folks don't rush down and be like, oh, I heard you can eat this. Because number one, it's not that easy. Whatever YouTube video you're watching to instruct you to do it, just don't trust them. There are things that can be dangerous if you don't do them right. And also, it's not really for non-native people. These things are for native people, and they are, the parks have a structured kind of permission for that, but that does not mean that everybody and anybody can go grabbing mushrooms, off the trail at the park. It does not mean that you can or should be doing this. So everybody just, calm down and be respectful. Yes.
Respect the closed practices of our native folks. And Thank you. Thank you for that story. And I encourage everybody to pick up this week's copy of the North Coast Journal, and read and enjoy the story for themselves. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And with that, we're going to turn to Thad, who's going to inform us of some news stories, one that kind of connects to the cover story. Would you like to bring those to us, Thad?
Yeah, absolutely, Tanya. And first, I just want to reiterate kind of the push for everybody to read Jen's story. It's really a fabulous look at a really, really cool event that incorporates just a lot of cultural ritual, and it was just a powerful read. So I encourage everybody to check that out. But yeah, so I covered two Humboldt Bay related stories this week, and one of them is kind of the growing tribal opposition to plans to create an offshore wind farm. So, as folks who have been paying attention, I'm sure know, the plans are underway. They're kind of in the scoping phase to build kind of a state-of-the-art wind farm 20 miles off the coast of Humboldt Bay. So the federal government has awarded two leases, and two different wind companies are currently doing kind of environmental study and planning, which will then go through kind of a full environmental review from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, BOEM. But in recent weeks, a number of local tribes, the most recent of which is the Trinidad Rancheria, but preceding them was the Bear River Band of Ronerville Rancheria, and the Yurok tribe, have all passed resolutions in opposition to these plans, and calling on the Interior Department to essentially kind of halt all these scoping and environmental study activities until they can come up with a better framework and process to incorporate native input into plans. The United American Indian Congress passed a similar resolution, I think, back in February. So there's just kind of a mounting opposition to these plans, and which is a turn that there had been some skepticism from local tribal officials about the prospect of a wind farm, but all of them had kind of said that they recognize the climate crisis is real, and we're looking forward to engaging in the process and making sure that kind of their cultural interests were protected, and this wouldn't be another instance of a large out of area corporation coming in and extracting resources at local residents, and especially local native residents' expense. And so this opposition really represents, I think, a recognition that those initial discussions have just not gone as well as tribal officials had hoped and had wanted. So I was working on a story about this, and actually reached out to North Coast Congress member Jared Huffman, who has really been a champion of the offshore wind project. He helped secure I think almost $500 million grant for the Harbor District for work to transform the old pulp mill facility, or pulp mill property on the Sonoma Peninsula, into kind of a state-of-the-art heavy lift marine terminal that can accommodate pulling in and pulling these 900-foot wind turbines out of the water to work on them and stuff like that. And so I just kind of wanted to get his response to tribal concerns, and so I caught up with him actually just yesterday morning, March 26th, and he let spill, I don't think he was supposed to, but that he and Interior Secretary Deb Haaland are basically en route to Humboldt, and I think they are going to have an event here in the next couple days, both a press event where they tour some, I think probably the pulp mill site, and they're meeting with officials to talk about offshore wind plans. But then they also had a separate meeting planned with local tribal officials to really hear firsthand their concerns. And Secretary Haaland is, of course, the first Native Cabinet Secretary in U.S. history, and has really put prioritizing and uplifting Native consultation as a priority for the Interior Department, and I think that has borne fruit in a number of ways to date. But this is obviously going to be a huge test. She has been a large proponent of offshore wind as well. Congressman Huffman really felt like this was an opportunity to see if they could build some common ground and find some action points that would alleviate some tribal concerns.
Excellent, excellent. And I do appreciate that the tribes are the ones that seem to be speaking up for the environmental impact and the possible complications of the matter. Of course, it seems like a great idea on paper, but it is something to consider, and I'm really glad that they're stepping up and hopefully getting more involved in the conversation as taking into account. I loved the quote, and I'm going to probably misquote it, but that here we are talking about the sovereignty returning to the indigenous folks, and they should have more of a say of what is developed in the future. And I thought that was very powerful and potent. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I should specify, real quickly, just what the primary concerns are. And so one is this contention that this is while wind farms are not new and have been all over the world for some time. This kind of deep water floating offshore wind farm is really a new technology, and so their contention is that the potential adverse impacts to wildlife, ocean ecosystems, and particularly salmon runs have not been adequately studied. Then they're really concerned about just the impact of these structures on the historic viewshed from both from coastal areas and then upland areas in tribal ancestral territories. And then the third issue that the Yurok tribe, I think it was, brought forward is just this issue of sovereignty, and that this is their I guess I can't say ancestral lands, but ancestral waters, and they don't feel like they have been, sufficiently brought in as an equal sovereign partner in discussing what to do with this project.
Absolutely. So I very much appreciate that story, and that feeds into the other harbor tale that you're talking about this week in the journal.
Yeah, so this one was not on my radar at all. I got a concerned email from a reader and saying that there had been a meeting of the Humboldt Bay. Oh boy, what is it? I'm blanking on the name of the auxiliary group. It's not the Humboldt Harbor Commission, but it's the Humboldt Bay Economic Development Group, and that's not their exact title, and I apologize for forgetting what it is. But so they had a meeting last week on March 20th, and Leroy Zerling, the co-chair of the committee, brought forward that he has been working, I guess, for years behind the scenes on trying to get the U.S. Maritime Administration to dock some ready ships in Humboldt Bay. So this isn't a program I knew anything about, or even really a government entity I knew anything about. But I guess the Maritime Administration exists in part to help support military operations. And the person who emailed me had said, kind of up an alarm that there'd be these warships in Humboldt Bay, and that's not quite the case. But what the deal is the Maritime Administration keeps a fleet of ships kind of strategically docked throughout the country, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. And the idea is that these aren't really battleships or warships, but they're ships that deploy to combat zones in a support function. And so they oftentimes are used just as transport or cargo ships. But what they're transporting is either military personnel carriers, tanks, things like that, or even ammunition and missiles. But they are, like I said, docked strategically throughout the country, and then and kept kind of at the ready, so that with just 24 hours notice, they can the Defense Department can fly in staff, can fly in pilots, and to board these ships and get them going to a strategically located military bases where then they're outfitted with live ammunition or whatever their cargo is going to be. And these contracts can be, somewhat lucrative for the docks that agree to house these ships, because they're, agreeing to kind of clear the decks of anything other than these ships. But then the pull for the harbor district and the proponents of the harbor district and economic development on the harbor is that it would really lead to a more regular dredging of the main entrance to the bay and the main shipping channels in the bay, which is an ongoing frustration. The port just doesn't have enough traffic to really be up on the Army Corps of Engineers priority list for those dredgings. But if there was a national security interest at play, the hope is that would work and get the bay dredged more regularly. So that is very much a work in progress, and we'll see if that contract comes to fruition.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry we'll have to keep that one brief, and but thank you for filling us in. That was not something on my radar either. So, thank you everyone. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now, or of course, you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. Pick it up this week, folks. Have those pictures and enjoy it cover to cover. Thank you, everyone. I am Tanya Schrum, and thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community.